Welcome to our panel, called Are You Covered? Cyber Insurance and Ransomware Incident Response. I'm your moderator. I'm Lou Covey. I'm the U.S. editor for Cyber Protection Magazine, where you can find us at cyberprotection-magazine.com. And just for full disclosure, I am being compensated for my time in moderating this panel. However, the questions I'm going to ask are my own. And the only input I've received from the panelists is whether they felt qualified to speak with authority on the subject matter. So with that in mind, let's set the table for this panel. One truth about life in general is that greed will always overtake common sense. In the case of ransomware, cyber gangs have had a pretty good thing going for quite a while when they kept their ransoms to less than $100,000 and the inconvenience to the end user was minimal. Insurance for that kind of loss was cheap and easy, and there was no need to negotiate. Companies just paid it and did the minimum to prevent any reoccurrence if they did anything at all. In fact, there was a report that came out last week that 3% of all companies that have been hit by ransomware have been hit again because they did absolutely nothing to protect themselves afterwards. So anyway, over the past few months, greed has overcome cyber gangs. Critical infrastructure was attacked and millions demanded in ransom. Moreover, the decryption keys that were given to the victims have worked slowly or poorly, if at all. The end user has faced shortages of critical materials, including gasoline and food, and healthcare was disrupted. This has led to an international uproar for governments and industry to do more about cyber criminals and hold them accountable. But the gangs are not the only people in the crosshairs. In September 2020, Gartner issued a report that if it could be proved that CEOs of victimized companies cut corners in security, they could be held criminally and civilly liable for any cyber attack that resulted in physical injury. So now the C-suite is paying attention. In this panel, we've brought together experts in cyber insurance, ransomware investigation, cyber response, and solution remediation to discuss what to do before, during, and after you are hit with the attacks. We have Curtis Minder, the CEO of GroupSense, a cyber reconnaissance, digital risk, and ransomware support and negotiation firm. Ritesh Agrawal, the CEO of Airgap Networks that makes some very interesting cyber defense products. And Sid Gavrnetti, CEO and founder of Zaguro, a cybersecurity company. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. And let's start with a view from the top. Do you find CEOs are taking a more active role in securing company and customer data now? Or are we getting involved earlier in the decision process as the liability increases?
Let me get started, Lou. I can give you a quick view of where I'm seeing this from my vantage point. Ransomware suddenly, and not surprisingly, has become a board level conversation now. And the CEOs have no choice but to participate in that action because the board is demanding clarification. We've also talked to a few investment firms that are actually demanding all of their portfolio company CEOs to give them a report on what is their ransomware readiness. Because you can imagine the reputation damage and the stock damage that you receive after the ransomware impact, especially the high profile one, it creates impact for all of the investors, including private investors and public investors. So this is not just a household topic, this is a board level topic. CEOs are definitely involved hands-on, very, very much so.
Okay. Curtis, let's go over to you. Do we see CEOs getting involved earlier in the decision process?
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly taking an active role in that they are delegating and asking their teams, what are we doing about ransomware, so that they can answer the questions that Ritesh brought up to their investors and the rest of their board. You know, I also think, you know, the public nature of the pipeline hearings, seeing the CEOs stand up there and have to answer these questions probably brought that home for a lot of the CEOs. What I am finding in the actual practice of ransomware response is many of them weren't ready. Maybe they're getting told by their teams that you know, their incident response plan was solid, or their business continuity plan would cover it. But there's, you know, items that are specific to a ransomware incident that aren't part of either one of those plans. And so what we found is is, while they're more cognizant and aware and starting to ask the right questions in the boardroom, at the moment, they're caught flat-footed during the actual incident a bit.
Okay. Sid, you are intimately involved with the CEOs. How are they handling what's going on?
Yeah, so because our segment and the customers that we focus on are on the smaller scale, right? So smaller companies with less than 500 employees, we don't see that much of an involvement upfront from CEOs because when you're a small company, your whole goal is to go make money, get some revenue in.
Right.
So it still is an afterthought, and we are slowly seeing that change, right? So one thing that's driving that change is large enterprises trying to make sure that their ecosystem, their vendors and suppliers, which are smaller businesses, are thinking about it. So it's slowly getting there, but in the smaller business space, we don't really see as much of a proactive effort by CEOs to protect against ransomware.
Yeah, and I want to make a comment on that, Sid. I think that I've made this metaphor before, so hopefully it doesn't offend anyone. But I feel like ransomware for small to medium businesses is a little bit like COVID in the early days, where people were like, I don't know about this COVID thing. It's probably not real. And then somebody they knew got it or died from it, and then they were like, oh no. And I think that's what's happening in the small to medium business space is they're right now they're like, that's not going to happen to me. That's somebody else. That's the Colonial Pipeline guy, right? But then they know the business down the street gets hit with it, and they're like, oh no.
and
real,
even
right? Yeah,
exactly. And even we know that the majority of businesses that are breached are small businesses.
Yep.
So, but when there are 7 million small businesses and people don't really understand what's going on in the SMB space because it's not in prime time news.
Right.
That's been the challenge.
Well, that kind of leads me, it answers the next question that I had, which was about prevention as a priority. So it sounds to me like we're still closing the door to the chicken coop after the fox has stolen the eggs. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in and say that we take inventory on how the threat actors gained access in every incident that we respond to, in every negotiation that we do. And it does boil down to a very short list of, frankly, preventable things that we've known about for a very long time. And so it's frustrating as a practitioner because we go in and we're like, again, with the RDP port and the credentials, again, guys, come on. So it's the same, I don't know, 5 or 6 items that need to be tightened up on a cyber hygiene perspective to at least not be the whole low-hanging fruit. Now, when you're a target, like if you're an individual target, if they're targeting a vertical or a specific entity, that may not save you. But if you want to reduce the risk 90%, doing some basic cyber hygiene will do it.
Go ahead, Ritesh.
No, I couldn't agree more with Curtis. I think there are fundamental flaws that are not being addressed. I think those are the ones that the customers and the enterprises have to address. And that basic hygiene is going to cover 9 out of 10 times. But I always tell this to everybody, you don't have to outrun the bear, you have to outrun the other person. And right now, when it comes to cybersecurity, if you're better than most of the other enterprises, chances are you're probably much safer already. Because the attackers are playing the ROI game. I just read a news that they have a VC firm now. It's like more like a Bay Area VC firm. They're investing in each other as well.
Yeah.
So they're all about ROI. You just make it expensive for them to breach you, and they'll go somewhere else.
So, Sid, is there any hope here? I mean, is it starting to seem more likely that companies are inquiring at least about insurance before they get hit?
Yes, that is absolutely right. So,
well, there's some good news.
Yes, right. So it's at least on their minds, right? And does not matter where it's being put into their minds, right? It could be from contract requirements, it could be regulations or compliance requirements, but it's slowly getting to the point where more and more businesses are asking for cyber insurance. But at the same time, one thing that we are seeing in the insurance space is that the premiums are going up drastically because of the number of breaches. So this year, the first quarter alone, premiums went up by 20%. and more insurance companies are getting stringent on what they cover, how much they cover, and looking for more security best practices in place and tools and technologies in place. So the requirement of contracts saying that, yep, if you want to work with me, you need to have a 5 million cyber insurance policy. That's great, because then the company comes to us asking for insurance and we tell the business, look, we can give you insurance, but you have to do X, Y, and Z to be secure. So in a way, it's causing this really good cycle of people having insurance, but needing to be secure to get insurance.
Okay. So general question to everybody, where's a good place for a company to start creating and upgrading their threat protections and responses?
Go ahead, Ritesh.
Go ahead, Ritesh. Sell
say,
your product here.
they can definitely start with Airgap. No, in all seriousness, we can provide free assessment to our customers if they want to talk to us. We're genuinely interested in ensuring that the customers are protected from ransomware. And you can trust me, I'll give you honest assessment. And if you want to buy Airgap after that, that's great. If not, I would even point you to the other places. But having said that, look, there is no, I wish there was a technical course you could do. I wish there was one resource I could point to and tell you that you go and or a magic wand that you can sort of wave and get your ransomware problem addressed. There are two reasons for that not happening or not being possible. One is everybody's environment is very unique. So one size fit all doesn't really work for everybody. Second is there's this ridiculous lack of education or understanding. The biggest problem in the industry at the moment is to me, the biggest competition for us is lack of, or presence of false sense of security, essentially. So, oh, I bought my EDR solution, the latest EDR solution, I'm done.
You sound like the CEO of Colonial.
Yeah, there you go. Or essentially, they could have other examples where we have a backup solution and we are all done. Or we have training courses, we train our employees, and that's it. That's all we need to do to protect against ransomware. The answer is no. You have to do more than one thing, and we need to understand what you're doing. Do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have microsegmentation? Do you have protection of devices from each other? Do you have applications protected from each other, and so on and so forth? So it's a long laundry list of things. You have to start somewhere. If you take care of basic hygiene, like Curtis was mentioning before, then you're pretty safe to begin with.
Curtis, yeah, I would say that just to add to that, if you're going to prioritize what you do to not be a target, obviously cyber hygiene stuff that I spoke about aside, you need to think like the attacker a bit and understand that the attacker, Ritesh mentioned, it's really about money for them. It's an ROI, so they're going to take the least path of resistance. Don't be that. And one of the ways that they're gaining access or picking their targets is basically using some open source tools to enumerate attack surface of a client. So what resources are even facing the internet that I can exploit, and then also asking yourself, like, well, what data can they use to exploit me, right? So that would be leaked credentials, private documents, things that would make it easy. Basically, the keys to get in are already out there. So taking a look at what those items are and monitoring for those items.
I'm actually working on a story toward this area, and I thought maybe I'll throw this out here to everyone. And if the answer is bad, then I'll throw the story out. But it seems to me a great starting place for anyone who has no idea what they're doing is penetration testing. Hire somebody to really test the system.
Certainly, and that plays into the attack surface enumeration, just understanding where the visibility from the outside is into the network. Yeah. The
problem is that can be very expensive.
I can make it free, Lou. We have a software on our website. If you go to airgap.io, under resources section, we have a ransomware vulnerability scanner. It's available for Windows operating system. Just download it, run it for your home, for your office, for whatever enterprise that you have. And within 5 or 10 minutes, it will give you assessment of at least known ransomware vulnerabilities that you're carrying in your network. And you will be shocked. When you run it in your house, you would be shocked to see how much vulnerability you are carrying. And I assure you, most of the audience who will run it in their office and home environment will tell me the same thing.
Well, then why are we having this panel? We should just be talking to you. So let's get a little bit more here. what are the, and I think this is probably for you, Curtis, what are the biggest or most common holes in a company's threat response?
Well, I sort of alluded to this in my first comment, and that is not having a plan. I mean, when we first started doing the responses, most of the businesses we were dealing with are on the larger side, very well-known brands, Fortune 10 size companies, right? And I was surprised to find that those companies, who you would expect to have a pretty rigid plan, did not have any plan whatsoever. And we actually made a joke about how we were going to put on the Group Sense website, Group Sense, no more yelling, right? Because we're going to help them come up with a plan. Because it was literally these very put together executives in a boardroom yelling at each other, right? And that is uncalled for. And of course, when the house is on fire, that is not a time to come up with an exit plan, right? So I think coming up with a ransomware specific plan for, God forbid, the incident does happen, who's the decision team, who's in charge, what are the principles we want to operate by? Maybe you decide right off the bat as you're doing this that it is against your business ethics to pay a ransom at all. Okay, cool, problem solved. Then now it's just a recovery plan, right? But you have to put all that stuff on paper, talk through it, decide which external counsel you're going to use, the incident responders you're going to use, all of that stuff, and then you have to put together a matrix of, like I like to call it an action card, a game day action card. You put that on the table, it tells you who to call in which order and what decisions you're going to make based on a matrix, right? And that will help that shitty day go much better.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that as the other gap there is resources, which it could be internal or external resources, but even identifying who you need to work with, like, okay, which legal firm do you even need to call? Everything is so new to so many people that they have a hard time trying to figure out what to do or how to even get started with that response plan.
Right. And instead, to your clientele or the small to medium business, there is no decision committee. It's usually one or two people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a few of, we do small business response as well. And you've got folks that don't even have an IT person on staff. Yeah. So maybe they have an IT firm, but who at that firm do I call? Like, what person is going to help me with this? Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the biggest challenges in the SME space specifically.
Ritesh, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, look, we can spend all day long. I think SMBs have a different problem. Their challenges are always sort of focused on their business. That's the reason they're SMBs. They don't have the resources, like Sid is saying, to deal with cybersecurity altogether. And this is where hackers have enjoyed $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 payments over a long period of time. It's most recently that they started asking for $40 million and $100 million from the likes of Acer and the likes of CNA Financials that actually ended up paying, at least CNA Financials ended up paying $40 million. There are different reasons for different companies. I think big companies, for the lack of a better word, I would say, again, have false sense of security, lack of talent, and lack of initiative. And now, hopefully, it's changing a little bit. Small companies just don't have the resources or the knowledge at all to begin with. And hoping that insurance is going to solve your problem or hoping that training is going to solve your problem is probably is the same as me hoping that some magic pill is going to make me lose 50 pounds, which is not happening. I just have to do the hard work, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has to be a complete end-to-end approach. It cannot be done in pieces.
But even at that point, it's difficult for a small to medium enterprise to actually be able to put together a comprehensive plan and still be able to pay their employees.
Yes.
So that brings in another issue, which might take up the most of this discussion. There is a big debate right now over banning payment of ransom in cyber attacks. Yeah. Do you think that's an effective deterrent? And Sid, I think probably that would put you out of business.
Well, no, not really, because I think it would be good for insurance, right? Because then the losses will be smaller. But the challenge there is there's so many aspects to the reason for paying ransom, right? So, for example, last year, a SaaS company had a ransomware attack, and they were serving nursing homes and hospitals. About 110 of those nursing homes. And imagine that the nursing homes cannot access patient records anymore and could result in a patient dying. So where is that line that you draw on not paying ransom? Do you pay ransom so you can save some people, or do you just put in a blanket statement that ransom will never be paid? So I think there are these ethical dilemmas as well. And
yeah, and I mean, I have a strong opinion on this too. I think that that is really short-sighted policy. I think that, you know, if you're going to make a regulation like that and offer no alternative results or no alternative help, it only punishes the victim and likely drives a lot of that behavior underground because, you know, Sid gave the healthcare example, but also there's a small business. If you spend 10 years building a small business and it was the choice of pay a civil fine or, you know, potentially get caught and get punished or lose the business altogether, you'll probably find a way to make that payment. You probably will. So if my point is it doesn't achieve the desired result, which is, you know, actually not paying the ransoms, it'll probably drive a lot of that behavior underground. So I think that the government, and I've been a big proponent of this, and I've said it so many times in a public fashion, that if the government wants to get involved in this, great. I'm glad you're paying attention, government. Here's what you need to do. You need to create a comprehensive program to help people defend and recover from ransomware without paying a ransom, not fine them, ban things like this. And again, like we talked in the very beginning, this is almost totally preventable. So if that program is built correctly, it will help people solve those 5 to 10 things that they need to do from a cyber hygiene perspective, thus reducing the ransoms paid, much more effective than unilaterally banning payments.
Yeah, there was yes.
No, my view on this one is going to make attackers more vicious, I think, in the sense that they would go after companies that have no choice but to pay and then do things that are possibly illegal or try to circumvent the system like Curtis was mentioning. And in my humble opinion, is we're going to victimize the victims even further by issuing this kind of mandate or guidance. We've seen DC police paid $100,000 in ransom. I mean, come on. They don't even have to, we don't even need the mandate to know that even the government has to pay the ransom. There's no other alternative. People's lives are at stake. The CI informations were leaked or threatened to be leaked. I don't know what happened to that case afterwards, but they leaked the information of 20 police operatives, and I don't know if some of them were CIs. And you know, if the CI information is leaked, I'm no familiar with mafia more than any movie I've seen, but from what I know, people die. Families get disrupted.
That's what a mafia person would say, Ritesh.
Correct. Exactly.
I don't know what that is.
Exactly. I don't know what that is, but I think people would probably get hurt, badly hurt. I think that is kind of putting a Band-Aid, trying to fix a leak in a boat, basically with a Band-Aid. That's not going to help. You need to do something which is more systematic and the right approach, which is put in place some guidance that companies with certain amount of revenue has to have this kind of security posture, has to have some sort of, I mean, there are so many guidance. We have NIST, we have so many others. Just follow the guidance. And Colonial Pipeline, not hiring a CISO for a company that actually cares for or takes care of East Coast pipeline, for example, that's not a pardonable excuse. I'm sorry. I have sympathy for the CEO there, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to be forgiving on that one. Like, you can't even hire a CISO. I mean, look at their salary. It's just not worth it. So I think we should have those kind of guidance that will ensure if there is a negligence, then the executive should be penalized.
That brings up an interesting question in my mind here. I don't know if you guys saw the story a couple of weeks ago, but the deputy minister in charge of cybersecurity for the country of Japan was being questioned in their legislature in a committee meeting. And it turned out that he had never touched a computer in his entire life. And this is the guy in charge of cybersecurity. Now, if you're going to be secure in the cyber world, never having access to a computer is probably a good thing. But if you're in charge of the cybersecurity for an entire country, well, that's another problem altogether. And the real telling point of this is that they were asking about the potential of cyber intrusions using flash drives, and he didn't know what a flash drive was. So,
well, I think there's some real analogs there to our current government, the people who are making these decisions. Much of them, I'm not saying they haven't touched a computer before, but they are not computer literate. They do not understand the complexities of this problem. And the folks that are lobbying are not necessarily objective about the advice they're giving them. And so I think, that is mirrored probably all over the world, but yeah, certainly here.
but my question here
Sure.
is, with that kind of an example, are you finding it? Well, here's the thing. When I talk to people about CISOs, their average lifespan at a company is about 18 months, based on the last number I saw. And a lot of the CISOs have never had any experience in security. So how often do you think it is that somebody is named a CISO merely to be a fall guy in case something goes wrong? Nobody wants to take that one.
I don't want to speculate. I don't know. I had never thought of that before, frankly.
I can look. I can speculate on this one, or I can at least opine on this one, which is, I sympathize with those CISOs because they don't have the tools necessary to protect themselves. They're under severe budget constraints at times, and they're confused. There are 250 startups or big companies that will walk into the door saying, "I am the best, and I am the best, and I'm the best," and then there's analysts that have 40 companies in each category listed, and there are probably 40 categories. So I can understand that any CISO can get overwhelmed and possibly make a mistake. And I think they are starting to get used to that, the fact that I'm going to have 18 months lifespan here, and then the next guy is going to blame me, and I'm going to go to take somebody else's position and blame the guy who was there before me. And it's just a sort of rotating musical chair kind of game that they're playing.
Yeah.
If we build the right solution and we protect the enterprise the right way by following certain hygiene, I think we can increase the lifespan of every CISO in our organization.
I think one of the other challenges is the lack of security professionals. Right? So that's another policy aspect, which really should be part of a government effort to increase the education level in this arena. Like, I don't know, more incentives for students to go be cybersecurity professionals, right? I think that's where, Ritesh, as you were mentioning earlier, it's that systemic aspect that needs to be addressed versus just standard bans on everything. And politics cannot be fixed, but
And I also saw there are companies that have higher average percentage of spend for security are generally doing better in terms of being able to protect themselves. For some reason, we've decided, okay, X percentage, and that X could be 1%, could be 0.5% of your revenue should go into security. And I think we need to revisit that. As our digital footprint is expanding, our cybersecurity footprint is not expanding at the same rate. People are very happy to include AI. They're very happy to include all kinds of digitize. Let's digitize this. Let's automate that. Robotic process automation. All of these things. Nobody thinks of, if we do this, we'll have to also increase the cybersecurity budget in proportion, actually. And nobody thinks that. And then there's always the after effects kind of thing. It's just, oh, we digitized everything. Now let's try to protect a few things at least. And that's where I think we have a disconnect. Every time you're doing a digitization project, make sure that you kind of spin off an appropriate amount of cybersecurity project to go along with it. And we are not seeing yet, and I can predict this on this call, that the AI-based malware are going to be the next forefront, sort of frontier in this thing, where malware itself will have AI baked in. And it's not only going to impact your regular industry, but it's also impact your AI industry. And at that time, it's going to be a real problem because nobody knows what's inside that AI. Nobody knows what's inside the Tesla autopilot. And if that is corrupted, nobody would know how that happened, how to protect it, how to fix it. Nobody would know. So that's our next big deal coming up, probably in the next couple of years.
Okay. Let's finish up with this question. As far as resources, not necessarily buying services or products, but where could a CEO or CISO go to actually find basics to get some sort of a starting point. I mean, my basic thought is a good starting point is to look at the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. And you take a look at that, and then you can say, okay, yeah, I can see where this problem is and where this problem is. And maybe I should get somebody in to take a look at that. Are there any other resources you think they should take a look at?
Yeah, definitely something as simple as a NIST framework. That can get people tons of information and even a better understanding on security in general, and where, from a people and process perspective, where they need to make improvements. It can also help with formulating a thesis and a story to get the appropriate budget from the C-suite.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I certainly hope that a CISO is not Googling how to start being a CISO. But I mean, if that were the case, I agree with you, Sid. You know, the frameworks are a good place to start. I think it's something that would also be interesting is, you know, because I've taken a look at these, looking at some of the cyber insurance risk books and how they measure risk, and seeing how that can be applied to the business. Because I think, you know, to your point, Ritesh, I mean, the security spend has to be considered relative to the business and the assets you're protecting. That is a complex and subjective thing that every CISO is going to have to deal with at the business level, because you know, it doesn't matter how many cool toys he builds or he buys, how many, you know, superstar, you know, white hat hackers he has on his team. Eventually, he's going to end up in the boardroom, and he's going to have to explain why those people exist, what they're doing, and why that's worth spending money on. And so the business level and the risk level books, and I found some, you know, from the cyber insurance industry that were actually pretty good at this, not specific to the you know, CISO role, that would be good. Yeah.
And to that point, I think for these smaller businesses, that's an outstanding resource. Well, because one, if you get insurance, then the insurance company's goal aligns with the business's goal, which is not having a breach. So if you find an insurance company who is ready to provide you with all the resources you need to be secure, then that's a great win-win, especially for small businesses which don't have the resources to figure out what to do from a security perspective. There are not even insurance policies that come with additional services and tools and a full plethora of security companies with that.
That's interesting. It seems that an insurance company like Seguro would have a lot of different resources that they've already listed.
Yeah, exactly.
And
especially because, you know, the company's goal is to not have a breach. I mean, no insurance company wants to pay out a claim.
Yeah.
And if there's a claim, then the insurance company wants to make sure that that claim is addressed quickly and the bleeding is stopped immediately. So they also have a full list of companies that deal with a breach on hand to come and help the businesses.
Curtis, does GroupSense provide that kind of training or information for companies just trying to figure out what the hell's going on?
We do provide, so we started getting asked by our constituents to provide some ransomware preparedness programs, which include an assessment of the current landscape. We write ransomware playbooks, sort of the planning components, and we will even architect and participate in tabletop exercises around ransomwares that are fed by our actual incidents. So, you know, the scripts are real from real scenarios, right? And so yeah, we do a little bit of that, and obviously we'll do the actual ransomware response negotiation and facilitation of the actual payment if the actual incident occurs.
Okay. Ritesh, you want to wrap this one up?
Yeah, look, my view is outsource what you can. Don't try to tackle this all on yourself, especially if you're a small business. Go to the cloud, get all the services delivered from the pros that know what they're doing, and do the little that you have to or you must, because everybody is unique in the way their deployment is. Everybody is unique in the way that the vendors that they have chosen at the moment. So there is no way that you can follow along with anything that is complicated. And this is for small businesses. For large businesses, I'll tell you it's more important because their network is extremely complex. Their deployment is extremely complex, and applying the framework is sometimes harder. So again, my humble opinion, and that's why I think the industry is sort of moving rapidly towards cloud migration of even the infrastructure and security, is because just enterprises cannot handle it on their own. I'm pretty sure that that's going to be the case for majority of the enterprise. Some of our listeners may have companies that have enough IT resources, enough security talent, and they can handle the complexity of it. But majority of those probably are understaffed.
Okay. By the way, Curtis, when you mentioned that statement, I hope they're not actually out there Googling how to be a CISO. I decided to actually how to be a CISO and came up with 337 articles, essentially type that, including one in Forbes magazine from 2 months ago.
Nice.
So there's a place to start, I guess.
I guess so, yeah.
All right. So, gentlemen, I think we're at the end here. And I want to thank you for this. And for those who have been watching this, I hope you've been encouraged. It is not that hard to actually get started as long as you know where the starting place is. And we've given you several. You can start with an insurance company. You can start going to somebody like GroupSense to get a basic understanding. And even people that are providing tools that they want to sell you are providing free services. So here's 3 places where you can get a start. Thank you for listening. And this has been Lou Covey with Sid Gavraneni, Ritesh Agarwal, and Curtis Mender. Thank you for paying attention.
Thank you so much for having us.